Welcome to World Knowledge Channel. Corruption is a global problem, seriously affecting the economic, social and political development of many countries. In the world, there are countries famous for high levels of corruption, where corrupt activities become popular and deeply affect all aspects of life. We will learn about the top 10 countries with the most corruption in the world, to provide insight into the current corruption situation and the consequences it causes for these countries. Which countries are they? Let's find out through this video. 1. That's Somalia. Corruption in Somalia is pervasive in the judiciary, public services, administration, police, tax and customs administration, law, natural resources, public procurement, and civil society, and anti-corruption measures to address them, as well as political divisions and structural changes in government, have an impact on transparency. On Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, Somalia scores 12 on a scale of 0, highly corrupt, to 100, very clean. The Horn of Africa countries' ongoing conflict remains a leading cause of rampant corruption, as terrorism, suppression of press freedom, political, social, and economic instability, and suppression of freedom of expression provide fertile ground for corruption to flourish. Somalia continues to suffer from extreme poverty, facing its worst drought in 40 years, but creating an environment where corruption thrives has made Somalia unattractive to aid agencies. 2. Next up is South Sudan. Corruption in South Sudan is among the worst in the world, with the country's corruption score of 12, the second highest in the world. With its high oil revenues, South Sudan was expected to achieve self-reliance quickly after the transition, but instead it has descended into civil war, economic collapse and increasing international isolation, while its rulers have seized control of virtually every sector of the country, squandering its resources. The country lacks any regulations to fight fraud and misconduct among senior government officials, particularly among government procurement officials in the finance and economic planning ministries. The Dura saga is the largest and most costly corruption scandal in South Sudan since the country's founding, although there have been dozens of other high-profile cases of similar misconduct. These episodes are often shrouded in confusion and almost never result in prosecution or punishment. A report by the U4 Anti-Corruption Resource Center identifies the main types of corruption in South Sudan as bureaucratic corruption, patronage, political corruption and embezzlement, stating that these forms of corruption occur mainly in the following sectors: mining, public financial management, and the police and security forces. 3. Syria. Corruption in Syria follows familiar patterns of state corruption, namely government officials abusing their political power for personal gain in the country. According to Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI, Syria scores 13 on the CPI on a scale of 0, highly corrupt, to 100, very clean, ranking it the second most corrupt country, tied with South Sudan, and 178th out of 180 countries in the index. Syria was labeled a narco-state by the United States for nearly a decade until 1997, during which time Syria controlled the cultivation of cannabis in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, a major source for the Middle East. With nearly 90% of Syrians living below the poverty line and 60% of the population food insecure, living conditions in much of Syria are deteriorating at an unprecedented rate. The Syrian government has offered little support and has done the opposite, extorting Syrians through ever-expanding administrative costs, border fees, laws and policies aimed at stripping Syrians of their wealth and property. 4. Venezuela. Corruption levels in Venezuela are high by world standards and are widespread across many levels of Venezuelan society. The discovery of oil in Venezuela in the early 20th century spawned political corruption. A large amount of corruption and mismanagement in the country has led to severe economic hardship, part of the Venezuelan crisis. According to Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, Venezuela scores 14 on a scale of 0, highly corrupt, to 100, very clean. When ranked by score, Venezuela ranks 177th out of 180 countries on the index. A 2014 Gallup poll found that 75% of Venezuelans believe that corruption is widespread in the Venezuelan government. Protesters cite dissatisfaction with corruption as one of the reasons for the protests in Venezuela in 2014 and 2017. According to the Cato Institute, Venezuela's history has been mired in a persistent and intense presence of corruption. In 1997, Pro Calidad de Vida, a Venezuelan NGO, claimed that about $100 billion in oil revenues had been misused over the previous 25 years. 5. Yemen. Corruption in Yemen is a serious problem. Yemen is the most corrupt country in the Arabian Peninsula. It is also the poorest country in the Middle East, with an unusually high birth rate, high rates of acute child malnutrition, and rapidly depleting oil and water reserves. With no system of control and accountability, corruption is endemic in Yemen's public and private sectors. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index ranks the country 176th out of 180 countries, with a score of 14. This widespread corruption has led to a weak government and corrupt power blocks controlling public resources. Corruption in Yemen is so pervasive that it is undermining the country's security and economy. The result of corruption in the public sector is a large number of so-called ghost workers, leading to systemic poverty and inequality. Corruption in the energy, communications, health, and education sectors has led to inadequate or no services at all. 6. North Korea. Corruption in North Korea is a widespread and growing problem in North Korean society. North Korea is ranked 171 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2022 Corruption Perceptions Index with a score of 17. Strict rules and harsh punishments imposed by the regime, such as banning access to foreign media or modifying radio or television sets to access foreign media, are often evaded by bribing the police. North Korean state media acknowledged widespread corruption in North Korea when it released charges against Jang Song-thaek after his execution in December 2013. The statement also mentioned bribery, falsification of documents, sale of resources and land, financial guarantees, and the squandering of money for personal gain by organizations under its control. It is widely believed that changes in the country's economic system following the crisis of the 1990s, especially the de facto marketization, have led to much higher levels of corruption in the country. 7. Burundi. Despite the establishment of anti-corruption agencies, Burundi is facing a deepening corruption crisis that threatens to jeopardize the country's peace based on state-supported economic development and growth fueled by foreign investment. Burundi is ranked 171 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2022 Corruption Perceptions Index with a score of 17. Corruption in Burundi is systemic. Corrupt practices persist largely due to a lack of controls on corruption, as the controllers, those tasked with monitoring corruption at the national and local levels, reproduce the same corrupt dynamics under that supervision. Low levels of trust among Burundian citizens in the state, bribery when confronted by authorities. The lack of unity among public institutions is another important factor that facilitates corruption. 8. Haiti. Haiti is considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Corruption is a scourge that erodes any efforts to establish a rule of law, a sustainable democracy, and improve the quality of life of Haitians. When ranked by score, Haiti ranks 171 out of 180 countries in the index with a score of 17. The efficiency of public finances and the rule of law have been severely damaged by years of political upheaval. Nearly 60% of Haitians live below the national poverty line. 25% of Haitians live in extreme poverty. Corruption is a serious and widespread problem at all levels of Haitian government. While there has been some progress since 2008, when Haiti was ranked the fourth most corrupt country in the world, there is still much room for improvement. The Heritage Foundation describes Haiti as one of the most difficult business environments with outdated governance. Poor economic management and crippling natural disasters have taken a heavy human and economic toll in Haiti. 9. Next up is Libya. For decades, Libya has suffered from a plethora of corruption perpetrated by the government, militias, and major oil corporations. Libya's corruption stems from what political scientists call the resource curse, a term used to describe a country prone to lower economic growth and weaker democracy due to its abundance of natural resources. Oil production has left the country vulnerable to corruption, leading the country into a civil war fueled by persistent violence and political instability. Libya is ranked 171 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2022 Corruption Perceptions Index with a score of 17. Corruption is largely rooted in the government, public sector, and private businesses. Libya has anti-corruption laws. However, lax enforcement allows widespread corrupt practices such as embezzlement and bribery in public procurement. Corruption in law enforcement is also widespread in Libya. Some reports have found police officers engaging in misconduct including bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, and extortion. Libya is still trying to build its local government to maintain a better democracy and fight against violent and corrupt regimes. 10. Equatorial Guinea. Political corruption in Equatorial Guinea is high by world standards and is considered the worst of any country on earth. It has been described as a near-perfect kleptocracy, where the scale of systemic corruption and the rulers' indifference to the well-being of their people place it at the bottom of every major governance index or ranking, below countries with similar GDP per capita. Due to its level of corruption, the country consistently ranks near the bottom of Transparency International's (TI) Corruption Perceptions Index with a score of 17. The government of Equatorial Guinea is controlled by a small group of powerful individuals who funnel the majority of the country's revenues into their own secret bank accounts in other countries. This is particularly serious largely because of the large scale of the country's revenues from oil and other natural resources, which are concentrated in the hands of an elite minority. In addition, the government uses force and intimidation to silence critics of corruption. As a result of the widespread corruption, most people in Equatorial Guinea remain in extreme poverty, without access to healthcare or education. Although corruption still permeates the institutions of the above countries, efforts from all over the world continue to prevent any further corruption by holding public officials accountable. We can hope for a future where the above countries can maintain a better democracy and fight corruption. In general, corruption is one of the biggest challenges that many countries face. It not only weakens the economy but also affects people's trust in the political and legal systems. By analyzing the top 10 most corrupt countries in the world, we can clearly see the serious consequences that corruption causes and the need for stronger measures to combat this problem. Only when corruption is controlled can countries develop sustainably and bring better lives to their people. If you find the video useful, please share it with others and subscribe to the channel. Like, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you in the next video.